Reservoir Dogs, Script and Screenplay Analysis by Sean McHugh, 2020-26, Part 6 of 12. 26. How does White fail to be prompted when Pink recounts his marijuana buying? Pink gives a drug story to White about buying weed or marijuana, where he wants to believe dealers regarding the quality, but who are unreliable, while in Orange's drug story, likewise given to White, plus the Cabots, White wants to believe Orange, the dealer, so that he's providing him a quality relationship, but who again is fake and unreliable. In the film's narrative, White has already heard from Orange. Pink felt funny or had misgivings about the dealers, and then felt funny about the present robbery job, but in both cases went ahead, followed by the same regret. While all this reminds White that he felt funny about Orange's drug story, but has accepted his relationship with him. Pink says he got fucked or defrauded, while White fucks and refuses to consider the possibility of being defrauded. Pink notices the dealer is untrustworthy, all as White should notice in Orange's story that Orange, the dealer in it, is untrustworthy, at least as a storyteller. Moreover, while Pink wants respectively weed and money from the dealers and the job, but gets low quality and a betrayed job, Orange, in parallel with him, wants respectively money and emotional returns from his undercover role and relationship, but gets being shot in the role and his boyfriend killing him. All three characters sense but fail to foreground or appraise subtle contradictions and double standards going on around them, which then lead to their demise. Here, Pink is annoyed with himself, saying if he ever felt funny about a job, similar to when buying substandard drugs, then he'd walk or decline it, all as showing his sharpness of mind beyond the others. However, although he's accepted the present job, there's still nothing stopping him from walking at this early point, especially as he also holds the diamonds, as the police, although monitoring the warehouse, are waiting for Joe to arrive. Despite his ravings over his poor state of mind in the past, and asking White, "What the fuck am I doing here, man?" again with the subliminal notion of men fucking, this state of mind is with him just as much now as he speaks, and indeed, like the others, issues from him being less conscious as a fundamental condition. The corridor shot while Pink talks reflects Orange as behind the wall to the left, listening worriedly to White's reactions, while a white chair that was here in the previous shot, disappearing for this one, is the increasingly uncomfortable possibility of Orange losing White and leaving him standing. Pink has also just told White that somebody fucked us up, and even suggests that Orange is the rat, while behind him saying this is a large phallic pipe at an angle from the wall, with a shadow at an increased phallic width and angle, and above two jumbled stacks of brown-orange chairs as testicles and pubic hair. Orange is fucking White in both physical and mental terms, while Pink's intimation also shows the connections between intuition and sexuality. But again, White never consciously questions Orange's integrity and remains lost to his emotions. Subsequently, the phallic pipe and chairs display, also illuminated by a white light hanging down, is again in the background as White furiously defends Orange against Pink. His relationship as centered on Orange's genitals in his mind's background causes his words and actions. Then, once again at the planning meeting, behind the gay sex rectum alley, on Joe's chalkboard, accordingly, is the pipe's shadow and matching pipe, while the shadow is seen wider still from the low morning sun earlier that day, as Joe being had by all three phallic gay men, particularly Orange, then White in his relationship and favoritism, and blonde with his sadism. Pink, soon arriving back at the warehouse after the robbery, says, "Man, this is fucked up. This is so fucked up. Somebody fucked us up big time, man," in subliminal conflation of the homosexuality and the various betrayals. White having to keep quiet in society about his relation with Orange segues into keeping quiet to himself about subtle misgivings over Orange. White gets annoyed about using his alias with Pink, but doesn't then think that his real problem is, by contrast, not dispensing with his fake heterosexual alias and thinking straight. Moreover, him saying to Pink in the warehouse, "Let's go through what happened," and previously to Orange viewing the store, "Let's go over it," reflect his private efforts to make sense of subliminal worries over his love relationship. In the warehouse side room background are bottles of embalming fluid for corpses in 5 of the store robber's colors, where blonde is given by a yellow wash basin with yellow taps, which White ignores next to the white one he uses. Then a green bottle on a green background above them reflects the concern for money across the mall again, in reference to Eddie at the diner referring to dollars as green, with American banknotes all in the same green on white. The bottle has a white top and resembles disinfectant, as cleaning after sex, while the background also has 2 white signs. 3 pink bottles and a single white bottle, almost by their side, are separated from 3 orange bottles of a different kind, for orange being of a different or fake kind of robber, and by the chair Pink was sitting on, as repositioned between shots for this. The bottles reflect Pink's efforts for White in his isolated and misguided concerns over Orange, instead to side with Pink and leave the warehouse rendezvous point and abandon Orange, and where White acquiesces then to the setup theory, but nothing further. The white bottle is partially emptied, however, as White's partial misgivings, and there's a completely empty further white bottle with an orange label next to the orange on the far side, as the final betrayal, emptying him out. Then when White and Pink return to the main room, Pink's chair in the distance is seen also to have been rotated back from his preferred reversed orientation, as him desisting from changing White's mind, and instead him also staying at the warehouse and with Orange. The brown and blue bottles are small and obscured, as those characters quickly coming to nothing, and with the blue in parallel with Blue's often obscured and hard to see coffin. The 10 bottles plus 2 extra orange ones, just visible behind the orange, compare with the 10 main characters plus other police on Orange's side. There is further a small dispenser bottle of the pink granulated hand soap that Orange's manager mentions for his drug story, and which is then next to Pink as he gives his drug story. Further on a workbench in the main room are 5 empty bottles in green crates, as the 5 real store robbers, who die but would have benefited monetarily, while an orange chair is by the crates as Orange undermining them. Then at the other end of the bench are 2 gray paint tins for homosexuality, a white tin with orange writing for White, a blonde tin spilling black for blonde psychopathy, and next to this a vice for his vice and the intensifying situation. Underneath are brown and blue buckets hard to see, similar to the side room brown and blue bottles, for those 2 robbers already perished. The warehouse main room walls and ceiling are also in a light or white-green color, all as the characters are contained by their monetary concerns, while 2 green padded chairs are their thoughts resting on and their lives cushioned by money. One of these is used for Nash's treatment as resting on the same concerns. However, White's deeper emotional concern for Orange breaks through this, particularly given by his reluctance before Eddie arrives to abandon the warehouse and Orange to get the diamonds with Pink, and by his defense of Orange at the end. Hence, as White tries to excuse himself to Pink, positioned between them in the shots is an area of orange brick breaking through the white-green paint, as White's emotions being more significant than both his money from the job and subliminal worries about Orange's integrity, plus hence the warehouse safety. Orange's orange-red blood likewise breaks through the situation onto White's white shirt, all as he walks around and shouts the opposite. To Pink's annoyance, White here has also given personal details to Orange against Joe's rules that compromise security, Joe having given these 3 their aliases and incognito instructions prior to the planning meeting for all 6 that morning, as confirmed by Orange talking to his manager and Eddie using Pink's name in the journey to the planning meeting. Pink knows from his advance instructions that White is in contravention when saying he divulged to Orange a few days ago. However, Pink also forgets he's just mentioned to White that I've known Joe since I was a kid, and is hence similarly divulging personal details, as making it known he's likely from the same area as Joe, while this is responding to White saying, "Me and Joe go back a long time," which by contrast, Pink doesn't object to hearing. 27. What's White's mistake in explaining about one of his previous jobs having an undercover cop on its team? White admits that he was infiltrated before, but escaped in good time, and hence may have furthered his skills for detecting this, yet outwardly doubts Pink's view of it happening here,
while also failing to consider that he might have been traced by the police for a repeat situation, even though this isn't the case. Moreover, his anecdote is again revealing personal details. He remains lost and being pleased as an older man finding a younger and good-looking partner, and hence keeps barriers around suspecting Orange. When thinking through possible traitors, Pink, Blonde, and Eddie assume falsely that the police shot Orange, as the unwitting second wave of them could have, and fail to inquire from White what actually happened for Orange to gain further protection from suspicion, alongside White's endorsement of him as a rookie crook. Pink, in his talk with White, questions if Orange is the rat, but he backs off at White's tirade response and assists in finding out how Orange was shot, which would have prompted more thought. Subsequently, White argues that it would have been unreasonable for him to have said to Orange after he got shot that he doesn't trust him enough, but indeed it wasn't. White himself is disoriented by Orange getting shot, while he keeps quiet to the others about the carjacking as a relatively simple task gone wrong, particularly as he's complaining of Blonde being unprofessional. Pink asks him if he shot any real people or civilians, where he declines the opportunity to say Orange shot the car driver. Moreover, Pink, despite speaking of being professional, hurts his hand when punching Nash, in contrast to White, while Pink and White indulging in talk about shooting police, as professionals, are at the end shot dead by police. White should stop and think that Orange then being shot by a civilian means nothing in support of Orange's integrity, beyond him being a less experienced criminal, and indeed he may not be one at all. However, when White lays Orange on the ramp, he first puts the safety catch on of the gun Orange is holding, in subliminal worry about Orange's reliability, as well as being a trigger-happy madman for shooting the woman with White close in line, as he complains about by proxy at Blonde for likewise being. Orange takes off the catch later to shoot Blonde. Moreover, White tells Pink that Brown is dead, but Pink then still suggests Brown could be the rat, and hence showing the invalidity of White's argument that Orange can't be the rat just because he's also been shot, and this time not by the police, but by someone who knows nothing of the robbery. White then tells Pink to relax, the opposite of what they should both do. Shaking his head at the idea of leaving as before, Orange gets help. White says to Pink's regrets about being in the job that what's done is done, but by contrast, at this time, there's still nothing stopping Pink from doing something about his misjudgment, if only he could see how much it's continuing. Indeed, in terms of feeling funny about the fraudulent drug dealers Pink speaks of, White is acting funny now in trying to contain him, saying he should wash and have a cigarette, where Pink notices White's delayed cigarette provision as via Orange's jacket, but again fails to act. In the White-Blonde altercation regarding the rat, Pink says, "I'm pretty sure you're okay," but he's had mixed vibes from White. Then Pink, after a washroom visit, following his anxious breakfast coffee drinking, says he's leaving, but instead, for a second time, gets dragged into conversation and argument with White, and he stays. They fight outwardly instead of seeing inwardly what they need to do. Pink at breakfast says his coffee has only been filled 3 times, and he wants 6, in subliminal reference to the 3 straight men and the 6 he'd prefer, as opposed to the 3 gays with the tensions and problems between them. Pink, when arguing with him violently, also reminds him that if he wants to throw bad looks around, he should do so to himself in the mirror, as he was just using. Here he was denouncing Blonde, who White is comparably as deranged as, due to Orange, although by contrast, Pink is the main one accusing others. Moreover, Pink here reminding White that 15 minutes ago, White nearly told him his name against the rules, in addition to him telling Orange his name, is a reference to Pink hearing White at breakfast saying to Joe that for 15 minutes Joe's been droning on about names. White was making a proxy complaint to Joe about his own failure to keep quiet about names because of his relationship with Orange, where Joe was surprised at White's annoyance. Then White also divulges to Pink that he divulged to Orange, and where Pink effectively joins White in his earlier self-complaint. White then gets angry at Pink for not agreeing to take Orange to a hospital because of what Orange now knows, but White is worried about the same thing, if with less honesty. White at least avoids trying to excuse himself to Pink for divulging to Orange by blaming Joe, with the two partially social bar meetings with Orange, Joe, and Eddie that were in opposition to Joe telling the robbers to keep quiet about themselves. Also later, when White complains to Eddie about Blonde, he further complains at Pink for being a silent partner, when indeed he has a partner keeping silent about his real identity, and while he's lying on the floor silent now, all from White's subliminal or deferred awareness. Again, the orange brick deeper emotions emerging through the white-green surface paint is visible behind Pink as White shouts at him. The warehouse door swings open by itself, and White goes to close it, as reflecting his emotional life making him an open door that he has to keep closing, and with his boyfriend being an opening door to the police. The back and side walls have closed doors, as White and Orange being for each other, yet leading nowhere, while the front and side doors, as similar, have another door within them, as the white-orange gay sex. Orange is given the role in the robbery of standing outside the store door and letting no one in or out. But when the waiting police intervene early, Orange didn't shoot at or stop them, nor them him, as they were aware of the situation, and if they entered the store, they readily got past him. Orange seemingly gives White no explanation for any of this, and White doesn't think it through, but instead misremembers the police appearing when the alarm went off, rather than when Blonde began shooting civilians a few moments later to intervene, as Pink explains, and hence White showing subconscious awareness of a setup. Although White uses a mirror while talking with Pink, he can't self-reflect enough and indicates an underlying uncertainty about the job by asking to go through it both with Orange in the stationary car before it's done and here with Pink after. Moreover, White and Pink smoke all white cigarettes taken from Orange, as White being smoked or exploited, while White and Orange smoke the same in the car. It's also Orange's job to signal when ready to Brown in the getaway car to drive from across the street to him, so Orange probably did this when White came out looking for him, as the police weren't in control to apprehend White, and they got in the car. At least the police who were part of the setup then only shot Brown and not Orange, even if Brown may have been shot before picking them up. Here, White was lucky not to get shot when out of him. Orange and Brown outside and in the getaway car. He had a 2-to-1 chance of getting shot, rather than only 3-to-1 as he assumes, although there's the preference for the driver to stop the car. If the police aimed at the car with White and Orange inside it, it would have been only for Brown and him. Yet he gets angry with Pink for Pink saying in connection with Orange being shot that some fellows are lucky and some aren't. If they withheld fire from the car, then White avoids considering that although Brown was shot, he wasn't because they didn't want to hit Orange by his side. Then, by contrast, Orange was lucky rather than unlucky at the store that the unwitting second wave of police didn't shoot him, and that anyone else also didn't shoot him in error, although Nash might have told his peers that he recognized Orange to then protect him, and thence twice saving Orange's life. Moreover, Orange, as unlucky with the carjacking, brings them all bad luck in the end, in parallel with White's and Joe's reflections on luck in the office. At the store, White and Pink were safer in having the role of taking the manager in the back to give them the diamonds, which Pink then held onto, while Blonde and Blue, with crowd control duty in the main room, had the most violence to deal with, following Blonde shootings and the hidden police from outside intervening and killing Blue. Orange then might have escaped into a police van as the gun battle started, but White comes out looking for him too soon, and hence Orange's relationship directly causing his downfall and the related deaths. Joe chooses his operatives' roles so that the younger and less experienced Orange and Brown remain outside, the tougher Blonde and Blue supervise people, and his two friends of many years and more professionally minded White and Pink get the diamonds. White and Pink retreating to the side room in the warehouse also compares with their role at the store, where they take the manager in the back. Eddie, on arrival, asks them where the diamonds are, having found out either from Blonde via his phone call to him, or from Joe and Dov via a police insider of theirs that transpires, who saw Pink successfully get away with the bag. 28. How are Orange's drug story scenes color-coded? In the evening diner, the seating is orange on one side of where Orange walks, and white on the other, for the relationship that the manager should be deducing from Orange. They use white seats and choose from white menus or adverts for food, as Mr. White conditions all they say and do. In the robber's diner, everything rests on and effectively chooses from orange, and in the policeman's diner, from white. Well, accordingly, Orange also wears or rests on big white shoes. Orange wears an orange and black, plus some white and blonde, colored shirt and a black t-shirt underneath, reflecting his alias as he explains it to the manager, plus being Mr. Black in his multiple layers of deception, while the other gay men on the team are white, as soon to be joined by blonde. Orange wears the same t-shirt when giving the drug story. Moreover, the manager only laughs at the alias and fails to see the orange and white colors before him, at most seeing the black for his undercover role, despite the manager likewise wearing an orange plus black top under his khaki green jacket and hat for his revolutionary interests. This color also recalls the white-green warehouse walls and ceiling as the overall concern for money. As in the breakfast diner, though the characters use a brown table as Mr. Brown's virginal thinking underlying them all, and as Orange enters the diner, its loudspeakers announce an event as a great day for little boys, and we take it very seriously. This reflects his childishness and interests in comics and film that he takes seriously, along with the benighted robbers, as little boys taking their job seriously when it's completely compromised. A Budweiser beer sign with its standard white lettering within orange and flashing on and off is hung on the diner wall and first seen behind Orange in a shot through the window from outside. The shots of the sign then reflected in the window next to the speakers from inside only accompany Orange failing to work out where White is from after talking about Wisconsin baseball. Then the manager correcting Orange's description of his precursor undercover operative as a good guy as instead a contemptuous scumbag who's selling out his amigos or friends. Both shots are where Orange is privately in opposition because of his new personal relationship with White, plus his robber friends who are also treating him well in socializing at bars. The silent but prominent sign flashing for attention next to a phallic post, as in the breakfast diner and the bar, is the manager failing to be in touch with subliminal information from Orange, while the reflection reflects Orange reflecting his relationship with White in what he says. Budweiser's colloquial name Bud then connects with White calling Orange Buddy Boy, while Budweiser as orange-colored lager is Orange's manager drinking or exploiting him in the misconceived sting. The manager says he'll take care of the precursor undercover Long Beach Mike's ass as treating him in accord with his wrongful treachery, but where the manager's wrong-headed plans will then likewise bring undercover Orange's demise with his same treachery, which the manager confusedly tells him to focus on. Moreover, this is the manager's subliminal awareness of White now taking care of Orange's ass, while he also speaks of White's ass being from Wisconsin and researching the sheet on, or police records there, of this Mr. White motherfucker's ass. White then confirms to Pink in the warehouse his question, "Do they have a sheet on you where you're from?" Orange has a white cup and saucer with orange trim as he betrays, or metaphorically, drinks White, while there are other white containers behind him in parallel with the empty white bottle in the warehouse, but along with an extra orange drink with 2 straws positioned between the speakers, as yet untouched, as their unthinking actions also about to consume Orange. The cup and saucer, plus one of the 3 white paintings seen as Orange enters, along with the Budweiser sign, also compare with White's coffin having orange trimming. Trim is further a euphemism for sex, while the coffin indicates the parallels between sex and death as coming to ends not subject to reconciliation or objectification in terms of anything else. The painting is of white flowers in an orange pot on a white background with an orange center, and compares with the breakfast's orange pots, while another painting is of white flowers on a white background, and a third only partly seen. These compare with the 3 breakfast diner paintings of sacks of oranges and 2 of railway tracks only partly seen. Meanwhile, the Milwaukee Brewers baseball team that Orange mentions White having an interest in has a mostly white uniform. Also through the window, as the manager speaks, are 2 raised flags for Orange's divided allegiance, one in orange and white for his relationship, and one in black for the dark and flawed undercover operation, plus Orange as variously scheming Mr. Black. The orange-white flag is seen in a further shot above the manager, as the relationship being the more important, but he remains oblivious. The tables Orange walks past have orange and white ketchup as at the breakfast, but with blonde mustard bottles to choose from, rather than blonde cups. On the manager's table he joins, however, the mustard is almost entirely obscured, as Orange having already made his boyfriend choice, and indeed he passed by some blonde waste food. Then facing the manager on the side of a desk immediately at the back of where Orange's head will be, and thence also at the back of his mind, is a warning sign in white lettering on Orange for the manager to be ready for and cautious about the conversation. This, however, disappears as soon as Orange sits down, all as the manager having had his chance to think in advance. The manager is also eating waffles, as having to consume waffle from Orange in failing to make up his mind over either his role or his boyfriend, and instead talking vaguely. His adjacent brown cup further reflects Brown's talk of disjunct thinking, while his white serviettes and use of them compare with the hand-washing of White with his paper towels, and of Orange in his drug sub-story musings to come, all trying subliminally to wash their hands of the situation. The manager then gives Orange his story script on white sheets on a white roof with a white parapet, as again them resting on and being enclosed by Orange's emotional entanglement. Behind Orange is a white phallic church steeple with a spire as ejaculation, while he constantly chews white chewing gum, recalling Brown's future sexualized reference to it. This time the manager is wearing white shoes, as subliminally dependent on white, plus a blue denim top for being meaningless, and his khaki trousers. Orange is all in blue, while behind them both is a blue sky, plus he wears black shoes, where the shoe colors reverse the ethnicities, and who has become the worse Mr. Black. The manager wears a multicolored headband for the robbers, but also in subliminal understanding a white and orange necklace, and subconsciously points at a phallic white vertical roof pipe as he talks. Orange also progressively rolls up the white sheets phallically with the steeple behind, until the manager takes and straightens them out again. As Orange learns the story in his apartment, he wears a white t-shirt in regard for his boyfriend, while there's a double window with white gauze, as his partnership with White, clouding his view of the world, and recalling Joe's office background. There's a white light bulb above as the initial idea of going with White, two leaning aerials in front as phalluses, picking up on signals and comparing with the black aerials on Orange's and Eddie's mobile phones. 3 blonde lemons as blonde left out, and all of them becoming lemon-like or senseless, and a white cup and straw comparing with blonde soda in the warehouse, along with the empty white bottle in the side room. The washroom in the story then has floor, walls, ceiling, fittings, and light all in white, plus orange brass taps above the urinals, again as White enclosing and governing Orange's background thinking and imaginings, while next to Orange there is a white switch in the American upwards on position as Orange switched on by White. The drugs bag, however, is blue rather than green of the Little Green Bag drug song, again as the story's ineffectuality in reference to blue, while the diamonds bag, as handled by Pink and Eddie, is black. The washroom has a door open to a side room with a trolley inside in parallel with the warehouse, but along with a white vacuum cleaner, as White hoovering up Orange's allegiance. Moreover, there's a mop with a blonde handle, as Blonde wiping the floor in terms of the robbery with chaos, but it leans unused to one side, as Orange having sided with White. It also compares with the plunger in the warehouse toilet pieces, along with the blonde wash basin that White also ignores in the side room. Toilets reference the anus in homosexuality, while washrooms may provide a place for gay sex. 29. How could Orange avoid deceiving White and prevent his relationship adding danger to his undercover role and the robbery? Orange should have considered more carefully the problems likely from a relationship with White and splitting his allegiance. Although he derives useful support and shielding as a team member from Joe's long-term associate and leading player White, the mental union with yet gross deception towards White compromises his thought and action within his undercover role, with its risks, and results in the serious injury and death for him and others. Particularly Orange hadn't prepared himself mentally to betray White at the store and for the police or even himself to arrest or shoot him. Instead, when White comes out following the blonde shootings inside, looking for Orange at his post on the door to escape, Orange acquiesces. Instead of the planned mass arrests outside, perhaps including a false one for Orange for protection from potential future vengeance, or just where he retreats to the police and safety, the unexpected chaos brings him to indulge his desire to continue the undercover role out of his underlying feelings for White, and they proceed with a getaway in Brown's waiting car. However, he's in a difficult position to have declined White's initial romantic advances, even if he could give himself time to think, without withdrawing from the undercover role entirely, and thus denying both his emotional needs and possibly his job and career. He had no good reason to reject White without raising suspicion that he's not who he claims to be, and at least then making his relations with him uncomfortable, while his manager, as prejudiced against homosexuality, along with the wider police force's needs for professionalism, would be unimpressed that he couldn't hide it and didn't explain this before his assignment. Love and money are central to the mind and life, and often in that order, with the phallic columns in the diners and bar right behind him, as sexuality at the back of his mind alone determining his actions, while after his seeming army recruitment failure, he may have had narrowing options for a job. White and Orange are working together, both gay, have a senior-junior dynamic, like each other, and otherwise have no one, while White would perceive Orange's sexuality, where denying it wouldn't work well. Then Orange's fatal error of judgment at least panders to White's seniority, plus the unexpected, wildly contrary intimacy yet treachery, to likewise direct him to a fatal error of judgment, including where White advocates for Orange's recruitment with Joe and Eddie, but later kills them because of him. The incognito character of some homosexual encounters, however, escapes White. Orange would have no good excuse to give to his manager for saying his cover is being questioned, and that he has to withdraw from the Cabots, and instead would be seen at minimum as a quitter, while ruining the sting planning and efforts to get him placed so far. Moreover, despite subliminal awareness building around him of his undercover relationship and role, at present he's well regarded by, and in positive situations, with both White plus the Cabots and the manager. His decision for a relationship is wrong no matter what the alternative was, however, because of the danger and confusion that will claim his life, but the situation is demanding a level of judgment beyond his capacity. Orange argues to himself that although the relationship is in contravention of terms of employment and adds something new, he can have it both ways, via enhanced trust from White and tenuously keeping all other parties in place for the assignment's duration. Yet the tensions created in him result in terrible inactions and actions, particularly with the car policeman and carjacking, as following Blonde's unexpected disruption and cause the Sting's problems to deteriorate further. Most of the injuries and deaths accumulate because of Orange. Orange hadn't yet found a love partner among his police peers, including where he'd met Nash 5 months prior, but forgot about him on finding he wasn't gay and regular friendship not being his main concern. And hence he probably accepted or even volunteered for perilous undercover work to meet what would likely be a wider group of men in the criminal fraternity. The White-Orange relationship is unprofessional from both sides, where White takes it forward, but Orange was also seeking it to begin with. However, there is a way out for Orange, or someone in his position here, that he seemingly fails to consider, where he both continues with the assignment while avoiding losing his police reputation and work, and continues with White while avoiding deceiving him, while minimizing the relationship's added risks to his role and the job. Following his initial recruitment meeting and first night with White, and before the evening diner meeting with his manager the same day, he could immediately speak initially to White, then call a meeting with Joe and White, explaining the same, that he's working for the LAPD, but become dissatisfied and offer to become double agent and change allegiance to them instead. He can say he's a recent recruit, being treated disparagingly, and now given a dangerous undercover role as a dispensable pawn with dubious morality that confuses even his manager, although avoid mentioning that he knows that Long Beach Mike has turned informant. Nash, as one of Orange's contacts, indeed comes to say that as he's only been on the force for 8 months, so they also don't tell him anything, while these two young recruits were introduced, after Nash had been there 3 months, by Frankie Ferretti for friendship, while the other staff looked down on them. They're putting him at further risk in not disclosing the sting either to the rest of the department, that will then send a second wave of police who could kill him, nor to the store, as again risking anyone there killing him. He's also to be given an unnecessary fake drug story that only adds to his worries. He can outline that when recruited for the role, he didn't have this fuller picture, nor had thought through the situation sufficiently, and now wants to change sides and give the police their deception back to them, while also getting extra payments from Joe, as may be agreed perhaps along with his Diamonds job payment. Joe can then choose to cancel the job or suddenly bring it forward a day where Orange plausibly can't report it, or even keep it the same but be ready to take on the waiting police, all while Orange passes disinformation back where the robbery will succeed with minimum threat of robbers shot or captured. Orange could also say if the store isn't advised of the sting, and hence that it may set the alarm off, the team can be advised and hence circumventing Blonde's shootings in his subtle desire to encourage the police, if not necessarily circumventing his abduction plans. There's a risk Joe will kill Orange when he makes his offer, but it makes more sense for the job and future jobs to take it, while White can give endorsement. Joe, however, would have to protect Orange, relinquishing his police allegiance and his double agency, and hence requiring a layer of deception to the other 4 store robbers, plus Eddie, if he also doesn't need to know. Orange, though, doesn't need to say to Joe about his separate hidden relationship with White, which Joe would condemn and undermine Joe's and White's long-term association. For Orange, once he's allied with the robbers, there's no tension with White, and his relationship is strengthened for long term. While although homophobia is the same in the police and criminal plus army fraternities, he found the boyfriend he was looking for with the criminals, while the other options failed him. Then he's been included with the robbers in socializing twice, plus a breakfast diner to come with the team, where Joe pays for them, as contrasting with the evening diner with his manager, who didn't wait for him to arrive before ordering and starting his own food, and leaving Orange to pay for his or have none. Furthermore, although Orange isn't aware, Joe already has an informant in the police, as indicated when Joe arrives at the warehouse with information he can only have from one, and hence may be pleased to gain a second and further weaken his adversary. The 2 informants could coordinate efforts. While Joe is familiar with the scenario and handled well, they can operate indefinitely. Orange needs to think quickly and call the meeting before he begins lying to White about his background as their relationship develops, but instead he meanders along and tries to have it both ways, neither withdrawing from the role nor changing his professional allegiance. Moreover, there's no option of extricating himself from the robbery team as well as the undercover role to then see White privately, as there would be no unsuspicious reason to give to either White or Joe, with Joe perhaps also thinking of killing Orange to silence him after divulging operational details about the job, as discussed with White in their conversation outside the store. They could also then trail Orange and find out he's a policeman and not a criminal, as he would continue to be telling White, while he couldn't then offer his services as only a single agent informant after showing such deception. Orange is confused and split between his affections for White and the total betrayal of him his job requires, after conflating his undercover relationship and role. He then has blood on his hands, as given literally, when on the floor, and where this contrasts with his mental fantasy sub-story in his drug story, where he washes his hands of his problems. On arrival at the warehouse, he has one blooded hand raised as Pink speaks of the setup, and by the end both are thickly and completely covered, as Joe gives his further responsibility for team member deaths, while Nash has also just been lost alongside the 2 car policemen. The group of 9 plus multiple other police and civilians are shot and presumably killed because of the huge mess of the sting that should have been completely reconsidered if he'd had the critical capacity or consciousness. Orange and his manager meet to practice the unnecessary drug story at a building instead covered in graffiti, as reflecting a high point of the sting's confusion, plus Orange's talk as worthless, but he has a platform as a stage for his acting, while the manager is the audience. Orange wears a white sleeveless top plus blue jeans for his relationship plus role to end in meaningless death, while the manager continues only subconscious sensing of Orange's reactions, and hence fails to understand his choice of clothing. The manager accordingly wears an orange t-shirt with the name Russell on the back, which means red as close to orange, but in white lettering as subliminal reference to Orange's name, or essence, currently defined by white. He further wears gray-white trousers, socks, and shoes, plus soles, along with his multicolored headband again, while the t-shirt front and back has the number 60, which Orange takes up for adding details to this practice story, as the manager recommends, as $60 bags of marijuana, then divided into $10 bags, as Joe having to make 6 portions from his robbery gains for his 6 robbers. He doesn't then use this talk when giving the story for real, and instead unthinkingly and suspiciously takes up Joe's name while looking at him to refer to himself casually as Joe the Potman, but at least he avoids using his own name Freddie, as in his apartment practicing. Adding secondary details as from the surroundings then parallels subliminal awareness and leaks and deceptions for all the characters, while extra details to sell a story applies to the other stories given, particularly Brown's and Eddie's about their songs, Pink's about drugs, and Eddie's again about revenge. The manager's instruction to memorize what's important, the rest you make your own, needs more careful thought when Orange's whole story is to deceive its listeners. Then the orange sandy ground is littered with white empty beer cans, as Orange drinking white, and in parallel with Orange's and other cups in the evening diner, plus its Budweiser beer sign and the empty white bottle in the warehouse. There's a blonde box in the distance, as Blonde rejected, and behind the manager, with both being unaware of Blonde yet, plus a brown ruined shopping trolley, as the film shopping for the characters and audience with the basic error of Mind Brown outlines. Behind Orange's top half is a separate corrugated metal sheet in mostly white and orange graffiti over the graffiti stonework, and likewise above the manager on the distant wall, as subliminally in the back of his mind is a similar separately fitted wall section, mostly in white and orange over the graffiti there. Both are subtly blended in, as Orange tries to blend his relationship into his wider robber color alias situation and deceive his manager. Behind Orange also has black for Orange, as deceptive Mr. Black, plus blue for meaninglessness, while behind the manager also has a green key, as money from their jobs, ultimately having brought white and orange together. The manager sits on a barrel of the same white, orange, black, and blue colors as him, unwittingly resting on their influence, again comparing with the breakfast diner situation, resting on orange seats, or Orange's influence, and the evening diner resting on white seats, or White's influence. 30. What's the meaning of Brown's discussion of the Madonna song, Like a Virgin? The film's opening words give its core issue of direct insight or mental coordination over intellectual reasoning and theoretical sky castle building that characterize the virginal state. Like a virgin as being without direct subject-to-subject experience, or like less conscious life forms, the robber team failed to see that the outward conceptual thought of the intellect, or Apollonian mind, is underwritten by the inward intuitive thought, or Dionysian mind, and instead the intellect floats away, overthinks, and loses sight of common sense. With only abstract subject-to-object or logical thinking that circumvents grounding in the wider holistic view, the team members have broken up calculation in place of real understanding, and hence make only subliminal interconnections across their environment. The subject-subject relation of good seduction and sex provides for clear insight and acting on fundamental dynamics beneath the subject-object relation of superficially plausible account-giving. Consciousness and intuition have direct access to the world, while reasoning is secondary, and where the epistemological project, as defining the confused Apollonian Western intellectual tradition to connect inner and outer worlds on the theoretical level, is misconceived. Inexperience then also means lack of understanding of feminine deception, with excuses and denials in courtship, testing the man's understanding of those background dynamics and situations. He mustn't desist, and instead show that in life he's not misled by such surfaces. However, the character's weak apprehension of situations and deceptions, and instead crazed, dissociated rationalizing, is due to inherent lack of the consciousness for it, and not because anyone's particularly a virgin, even though the nature of their ethnic psychology and subsequent culture is Apollonian and unconducive to courtship, and instead repressive, as leading to all the sexualized bad language. They make observations, but the connections and relevance between them stay lost within the intellect and aren't coordinated by the intuition through to the foregrounded conscious level. Brown at the breakfast diner says, "Let me tell you what Like a Virgin is about," to announce the film considered as this song discussing this limited or undeveloped state of mind. Moreover, its singer's name, Madonna, is a synonym for the Virgin Mary in Christianity, whose iconography is offensively stepping on a snake as the phallus and sexuality, in contrast to Orange and his phallus as a snake charmer for White, as Eddie subliminally says. Brown says, the entire song, it's a metaphor for big dicks, to mean the entire film as a song is about the character's mentality in failing to see two connected areas of deception going on. There is Dix as Orange's hidden police infiltration with intrusion and exploitation, given metaphorically as phallic penetration of the robbers, plus the hidden White-Orange relationship with favoritism from White that distracts from the infiltration, given literally as phallic penetration of those two. White is the crossover point where he's being metaphorically and literally dicked, including where he divulges details for Orange to pass on, and accordingly, Brown's song interpretation applies directly to him. The same virginal underdevelopment of mind provides for the failure to see situations' subsurface issues and think critically, as well as the failure to make sense of sexuality in others and themselves, as including the anecdote's extreme crudity. Sexual maturity of mind and critical insight are conflated, although underlying these is a required degree of consciousness for the situation's deceptions that none of the film's characters nor most of the audience have. Brown's spontaneous anecdote explains the song as repeatedly being intruded into and had in sex, but no one stops to think if there might be applications to them, even as he looks around at them. He expresses a subliminal awareness of the men's undeveloped state now and throughout the film, including himself, particularly in terms of not seeing the undercover policeman, nor the undercover love relationship where White gets the dicking both ways. Saying dick repeatedly 9 times and serious dick action conflates both the traitor within them as repeatedly making police reports about the team, and likewise the frequent sex of White and Orange as sitting immediately to his right, while gay sex has fallacies or dicks as the only sex organ. Brown, as the least capable and most stupid team member, then conveys these truths with least inhibition out of the culture's sexually repressive terms that govern his foolish language. However, the other 7 just take him to be a dunce, with Orange, the main exploiting figure, doing both the robbers and White, showing extra affected exasperation in response to the story, as most being about him. Orange, alongside penetrating the team, is the John Holmes porn star figure who White as the girl meets. Orange derives no pause from the indication that there is a level of awareness present of both his main deceptions, while Blonde, as another exploiter, openly disagrees with Brown. White, Pink, and Blue give Brown uncomprehending looks, while Eddie shakes his head embarrassedly, and Joe is apologetically polite in being the recruiter. They variously try to redirect or talk over him, and he loses his own train of thought for a while, again reflecting their disjunct musings coming and going. Blonde, also as first to interrupt, doesn't want to hear metaphorical talk either about the White-Orange sex as having missed Orange's potential attentions in only meeting him that morning, nor about team exploitation with his intentions to abduct and take revenge on a policeman as creating unprofessional complications against the Cabot's wishes, particularly with Joe and the others listening. Blonde tries to say the girl was vulnerable then, meets a sensitive guy, in contradiction to the girl as hardened criminal, White, but Brown argues him down. Orange then shifts uncomfortably and asks a strangely unknowing question about the true Blue song Brown also mentions, as only drawing further awkward attention to himself.
Orange, as policeman and lover, is doubly the subject of Brown's interpretation, whereas White is only lover, while Eddie's and Joe's interruptions, with Eddie taking a drink from his beer, are them subliminally not wanting to consider their job with such arrangements. White asks Joe what his book is that he's reading from to take forward the distraction, before Brown insistently returns, saying the girl was promiscuous, but this time leading her to pain, in parallel with White's many previous jobs and relationships, but this time job infiltration and relationship betrayal leading to pain. The anecdote is what the characters and the audience most need to listen to, but instead the characters don't want to know. And in most film showings, its deliberate offensiveness makes some audience members walk out, all in parallel. In a deliberate strategy, these people are hence drawn into the film regardless, creating subtly wry and a self-advertising theatrical spectacle of those who can't think, while being a mechanism for clearing the least critical-minded in the audience as beneath any consideration. The characters and the audience are listening to the story the same, and so the film provides the makers, as society's arbitrary elite, with a level of ethical clearance. When the characters have only distaste and don't think or understand, and consequently are all exploited and perish, if the audience is the same, despite the results of their incomprehension being explicitly given to them on screen in the film to follow, they can likewise be exploited and perish, as they are shown to have no consciousness within them that is being mistreated. The meaning of Brown's song and why he mentions it remains subliminal to him, all as with Blue, Eddie, Blonde, and Orange, and their songs as the more clearly identifiable character songs, and all as the film and its critical content considered as a song remains subliminal to the remaining audience as still weakly perceiving or conscious. For the makers, the characters condemned in the film become the audience equally condemned in life in failing to listen, see, think, and properly understand what is before them. The whole film is paralleled by Eddie's Vicki Lawrence song, which the characters discuss and interpret in some detail, but they and the audience, again similarly, fail to see its significance as giving the twin issues of Orange as traitor and lover, along with Blonde's and White's real names, Vic and Larry. The breakfast conversation comprises topics and remarks provided out of individual characters' subliminal awareness of their situation, followed by the rest of the characters disagreeing with them out of only superficial responses. Moreover, Eddie, listening to his song repeatedly but not understanding, compares with the vast array of elements for the audience to perceive, but also with watching the film repeatedly but not understanding. The elite greatly influence major aspects of society, including filmmaking, and Reservoir Dogs is a product funded and designed by them for their purposes, where audience deception is a wholly amoral test, either justifying or blocking its exploitation depending on response. The hidden policeman takes advantage of the other uncritical characters, all as the hidden elite takes advantage of the uncritical audience and population. Moreover, Brown, in his story, subliminally addressing White and Orange, and speaking of a woman as a coos, and then her pussy, both as genitals, connects with Pink at the planning meeting, speaking of his alias, comparing with pussy. He asks White to trade colors with him in another reference to White as a pussy or woman, and his ineffectual status as a man, while Orange also twice uses this word, but no one else. Moreover, Orange says, "Don't pussy out on me now," to himself in the mirror before the heist, but then abjectly stands and looks in, failing to shoot White to stop the 2 police killings while making other feeble judgments. Brown's sexual metaphor of actor Charles Bronson digging tunnels in The Great Escape 1963 film connects with White talking to Orange in the stationary car earlier in the narrative, mentioning someone who thinks he's tough and righteous, like Charles Bronson, his later police roles. In both these, Bronson is subliminal reference to Orange, either tunneling into the operation as a policeman, and thence the team members trying to escape the sting, or as Orange in his superhero fantasies that White has become aware of. Brown and White are further subliminally referencing Bronson's association with vigilante roles, where White will eventually get Orange back and shoot him. Of the many popular cultural references, Bronson is uniquely and independently mentioned twice for Orange, as undercover lover and undercover policeman. Orange, on leaving for the heist, also compares himself to the similar reserved fictional police detective Beretta, who characteristically holds an unlit and all-white cigarette to his lips, all as Orange then does in his apartment, practicing the drug story, where he has one unlit and one lit cigarette. White also uses an unlit cigarette in his containment efforts with Pink in the warehouse, perhaps getting this from Orange, while the cigarette is from Orange and all white. Then, feeling like a virgin again through suffering pain, references White as never previously being defeated by an undercover agent, alongside the agent's literal sex with him. White has carried out crimes or exploited and done society over many times, or in the story having had sex many times, but now he gets the same, where the betrayal at the end makes him feel like a virgin criminal. The white color also stands for virginity and innocence, along with goodness and purity, for his unwavering regard for the less worldly and then injured Orange. Accordingly, Pink, in his talk about tipping, speaks of being treated badly by employment situations in the past, such that he now thinks clearly, whereas White, having escaped this, leaves him less mature and still only thinking in emotionally attached ways, and he disagrees strongly with Pink, arguing for tipping, not against. Directly behind him, and hence at the back of his mind, is one of the two orange notice boards, with white notice boards covering them up as his unwitting covering-up for Orange, who is tipping off the police department. Meanwhile, Tarantino acts brown and hence, like a virgin, further relates to his superficial directing debut, and with the words being his and the film's virginal moments, while the actor playing Eddie is also brother of Sean Penn, husband of Madonna, 1985-96, shortly before the film was made. The popular entertainment industry, providing the film's music along with the film, is conditioned by its elite controllers, hence the poverty of mind not to bring critical perspectives to it, allied with cultural sexual repression in opposition to the maturity of mind and criticality from good courtship and a developed relationship, results in being exploited in real life. The falsification processes in cinema and in life become the same. Moreover, the conversation is then inappropriately relaxed, with even beer on the table, and the robbers showing little inward focus or concern about the day and its risks ahead, and despite Joe berating them about making jokes in the planning meeting right before. However, Joe, the leader, as most needing to think, instead has only a vague sense of one of his contacts being wrong, and so is lost in his book of contacts, before White, in being duped the most thoroughly, breaks him out of it, where Joe then jokes with Blonde about shooting White. Indeed, however, Joe also shouldn't be trusting White following Orange's incursion, and ultimately White shoots Joe. Joe says he's found the book in a coat he hasn't worn in a coon's age, as long-living raccoons, but also coon as derogatory for a sly black man as a subliminal link to the trader's handler plotting against him, that by some route he surmised from socializing with Orange. Joe and Orange's manager, in parallel, arrange a meal in a diner with Orange, where he deceives each of them. The coat isn't visible here, but it's a white color when he wears it in the final scene, with his same breakfast shirt and trousers, as referencing White's failure to keep his name undisclosed to Orange, and with the book black as Orange Mr. Black. Joe tries to remember a Chinese contact in the book, in terms of the situation being all Chinese, or incomprehensible to him in not knowing about White, Orange, nor White and Orange. It further references Orange's manager's interest in China earlier in the narrative, and his parallel unwitting organizational problems in the sting, including where out of socialist or Chinese politics, operatives' inward characteristics beyond their given positions aren't properly considered. White then responds irritably in mentioning Charlie Chan, a fictional Chinese detective, as him subliminally having a detective in mind due to worries over his relations with policeman or Detective Orange that he irritably doesn't want to face. Although Joe's been mumbling out of his book, White fails to notice that this is also partially only within the team's unanimous efforts at distracting Brown from his grossness. Whether White takes issue with or sides with Joe, the subliminal references within him and others are inescapable. To be continued. Reservoir Dogs. Any questions?